April 12th, 2015. The moment everything changed.
Hit and run driver that left behind some major damage and injured one person.
San Diego police were on the hunt. Earlier that night, a woman was driving downtown to pick up her boyfriend. When she stopped at a traffic light, a man forced his way into her car. He ordered her to drive away, or he was gonna hurt her. The man told her she must take him to a nearby house so he could buy some sort of drug. He then directed her to park near a house that was under construction. He reached over, turned off the ignition and lights. He took the car keys and proceeded to violate the woman over her clothing. They fought in the vehicle and eventually she ran away and called the police. This is where the story takes a dramatic turn and chaos ensues. But before this night, before any of this had even started, before this man decided to make a decision that would change his life forever, he made a decision to start a family. See, this man was Coleridge Bernard Stroud III, and 15 years before this, he and his wife Kimberly had a son whom he had passed his name down to, Coleridge Bernard Stroud IV, or as most people called him, CJ. We still don't know exactly where the J is from, but this is where our story starts. A kid living in Rancho Cucamonga, California, and the youngest of 4 children. A kid from a very young age who was different than the rest. See, one day when CJ Stroud was just 3 years old, his parents Kimberly and Coleridge picked him up from daycare and a woman who worked there stopped them. Kimberly recalls a woman telling her, "I think your son is very special." They laughed it off. She probably says that about every kid, Kimberly thought, but the woman was adamant. She said, "No, I'm serious." See, the children had been outside playing with a basketball on a Lil Tykes hoop that day, and CJ kept slam dunking on the kindergartners. They were at least 2 years older than him, and the daycare workers said they had never seen anything like this. "He's just always been that way," his mom Kimberly would say. "He was very driven and very strong-willed when he was little. He just believed in himself and his abilities. And whenever he would see another quarterback or another football player doing something, he would just study them until he could do it too. That's always how he's been. He's always been determined." See, Kimberly saw that from a young age, and that determination would follow him into sports. The Strouds had put CJ in a variety of options to see what he liked. He played baseball for a few years and even pitched, but he found that boring. He tried soccer too, but that only lasted 1 season. Now, basketball, that was the Stroud family passion. They had a court outside their house, and CJ, the youngest of 4 children, banged around with his older brothers, perpetually frustrated that they never let him shoot it. He was completely overmatched. His brother Isaiah was 7 years older than him, and 6 years separated him and his brother Asmar. But CJ, he never stopped playing. His mom said that the older siblings would toughen him up, and this toughness led him to another sport. See, CJ started his football career with the Alta Loma Warriors, but by the 7th grade, he had yearned for tougher competition. He told his mom that he wanted to play in the Snoop Youth Football League, founded by the rapper Snoop Dogg. Kimberly Stroud, she had her concerns. "I was like, no way, they are too tough," she said. "That's my baby, I just prayed the whole time." But CJ, he tried out anyway, and the next hour plus was hard to watch. Hungry teenage tacklers coming lightning fast at Stroud, trying to break the new guy in. Kimberly had never seen her son move so quickly, and his new coach, Priest Brooks, hadn't seen a quarterback like Stroud before. He stood just 5'9", which was an inch shorter than the coach, and although he didn't have a ton of zip on the ball, he had something better. A feathery touch and an ability to put the ball wherever he wanted. So, of course, he made the team. He was always the best. This determination and success wasn't something new to the Stroud family. See, despite his father's unfortunate future, according to CJ's mother, the Coleridge men are known for having accomplished great things in their lifetime. Every generation of Coleridge has had their struggles, but they are phenomenal, intelligent men, said Kimberly. His great-grandfather, the first Coleridge, was a 20-year Navy veteran and a tap dancer. He was a small man and very well dressed. CJ's grandfather, Coleridge II, once went into a burning house to save children who were trapped. He suffered severe burns on his body and his face, but he saved those children. He was a hero in the community. Coleridge III, CJ's father, was an executive at a Fortune 500 company. He also founded a church in San Bernardino County where CJ grew up, and he built a family based around their faith. See, Kim and Coleridge had taught their son the importance of faith and keeping God first. Every Thanksgiving when he was a child, CJ and his family would go and pass out turkeys to the homeless in the Rancho area. This built a tight bond between the family. See, Coleridge, he was CJ's best friend. He was his first coach. He taught him about sports. He took him to his games. CJ said that his love for football originally came from his father. His family was givers, big on birthdays and Christmas. They bonded over food. They used to go-kart riding together. CJ remembers his AAU trips, the long car rides with his dad. They could talk about anything. He taught CJ one lesson that stood out. Just because you make a mistake doesn't mean you are a mistake. But in that wholesome second, what neither of them knew was that this moment and those words would soon have to mean more than ever. Fast forward to 8th grade. CJ was about to head to Rancho Cucamonga High School, and his life was quickly about to change forever. See, in 2012, the Stroud family suffered a major division. Kimberly and Coleridge's marriage was on the rocks, and they ultimately decided to end it in divorce. Now, this alone can be tremendously hard on any family. Coleridge was a successful businessman and a pastor. He had been sober for nearly 20 years, but all of that came crashing down as the divorce began. Coleridge slowly began falling back into old habits. See, when he was in his 20s, he had been arrested a few times after getting mixed in with drugs. He was charged with felony drug possession and receiving stolen property. These offenses, they lived on his record. After the divorce, Coleridge's life, it began to spin out of control. He began using illegal drugs once again. Those drugs led to the incident on April 12, 2015. After kidnapping and assaulting this random woman, he stole her car. Coleridge fled the scene and headed straight for the San Diego Bay. However, a San Diego Harbor police officer saw the vehicle, which had been reported stolen, and the officer activated his emergency lights. Stroud continued driving at about 60 miles per hour in a 45 mile per hour zone. He eventually crashed into a pole, totaling the car, and when police gave him orders, he refused and proceeded to jump into the San Diego Bay. That night, police eventually captured him and he was arrested. A year later, Coleridge Stroud III was sentenced to 38 years of prison. This devastated the Stroud family. Coleridge was CJ's best friend. He saw him as Superman, and suddenly he was gone. CJ didn't talk to his father for years. His father tried, but CJ, he just didn't want to talk. He was a kid. He was still hurt, still angry. The incarceration sent the Stroud family into severe financial debt. His mother was now forced to raise and provide for the family alone. With Coleridge gone, Kimberly had to worry about how she'd feed and care for her two youngest children, CJ and Ciara. She worked labor-intensive jobs and eventually became a property manager for a storage facility. They lived in a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment above the storage units. Now, CJ, he never complained. Not when he wore hand-me-downs or when he played part of a football season with cleats that he had grown out of. When Kimberly saw the red blisters on his feet, she asked why he didn't say anything. He responded, "I don't want to bother you, Mom, because I see how hard you work." His mom inspired CJ to work harder too. Kimberly remembers him saying to her, "Mama, you're not going to have to do this forever. I just want you to know that." And, well, he was right. CJ would take this feeling and use it as added reason to succeed. See, CJ didn't play in a single varsity football game until he was a junior in high school. And in his first start, Stroud actually hurt his ankle in the first quarter of the game, forcing him to miss the second week and come back limping in the third game. So it wasn't much of a surprise that he didn't garner much recruiting buzz in his junior season. He finished as only a 3-star recruit. But the difference was mentally, CJ was stronger than any other high school quarterback. All of the challenges, all of the adversity that he had faced made football seem like a reward. So he kept working, never letting anything get in his way. And finally, that was all about to pay off. As a senior, CJ was now unstoppable. He was the Inland Valley Daily Bulletin Offensive Player of the Year after passing for 3,878 yards and 47 touchdowns. This led to an Elite 11 quarterback camp in Texas, where he was one of the lowest ranked quarterbacks at the event and one of the only players whose parents didn't hire a professional coach for him. Over the course of the weekend, though, Stroud outperformed everybody and was named the MVP. Finally, after seeing this, college coaches started calling. Ohio State coach Ryan Day offered him a full scholarship, and Stroud ended up finishing high school early and arrived on campus in January of 2020. In his first days in Columbus, Stroud gravitated to the Hope City House of Prayer and sat in the balcony on Sundays with a group of football players. Pastor Brian Williams said Stroud and receiver Cameron Babb were sort of the leaders of that group. Now, COVID-19 hit that spring, and when players returned to campus under pandemic protocols, well, Stroud and Bab had a lot of time to get to know each other. Bab, he was a 4-star recruit himself from St. Louis, and he had been in Columbus for 2 years when Stroud arrived, but had yet to see the field. He tore his ACL the summer before his first training camp and missed that entire next season, then suffered another knee injury that spring. He tore his ACL 4 times, twice in each knee. Bab said that there'd be moments where he truly wanted to give up, or didn't feel like he had the confidence to be the player that he could at times. Whether it was just a play at practice or a conversation in the locker room, Bab said that CJ would actually always tell him how good he was despite how he really felt. He believed in me in moments I didn't believe in myself, Bab said. In November of 2022, Bab finally made his season debut against Indiana. In the first series he played, he walked up to CJ Stroud and told him, "I love you, bro." Now he's not sure whether Stroud even remembered it, but then they were in the huddle and Day had called a particular play, but CJ, he had an idea of his own. According to Bab, Stroud wanted to get his friend the ball. The Buckeyes were on Indiana's 8-yard line, so Stroud rolled out and found Bab in the end zone for his first collegiate touchdown. "I remember the first thing I was going to do was get on my knees and worship Jesus for the world to see," Bab said. "As I got on my knees, CJ allowed me to have that moment as he was kind of waving everybody off. I ended up getting up and hugging him. In the days where I didn't want to go to rehab or practice, I would say those were days where you have guys like CJ. They speak to you." See, CJ was the leader of that Ohio State team. CJ was a role model for everyone around him. In 2022, after becoming a Heisman Trophy finalist as a redshirt freshman, Stroud, according to On3.com, ranked number 4 in college football NIL rankings with a $2.8 million estimated valuation. The kid who had played a high school football game with only one contact lens in because he couldn't afford to buy a replacement pair was now driving around Columbus in a Bentley Bentayga. But even with all the newfound success, Stroud still had one issue: the relationship with his father, the man who had started his love for the game. CJ still stressed about this. It was truly the one thing holding him back. In a phone interview from prison, CJ's dad had said, "Repairing our relationship had to come on his terms. I continued to pray. I continued being a voice of comfort and encouragement and advice for him. But it's always been on his turn because my son didn't put me here. My actions allowed me to be here." For years, after his father went to prison, CJ didn't let people see his emotions. CJ kept everything inside. He didn't want them to see what he was going through. That his father was no longer there. That he couldn't afford to do certain things. But as CJ matured, he began to see his father for what he actually was. He was a human with flaws. He wasn't perfect. He finally remembered what his dad had taught him. Just because you make a mistake doesn't mean you are a mistake. You see, he too had mistakes in his life. He began to wonder how he could judge his father. He had punished him enough by not talking to him. CJ had said he made a mistake, and at the end of the day, I said I'm not going to do that anymore. It took me to start going through some stuff to realize that this just isn't right. And as a result, CJ began to open up and eventually began rebuilding his relationship with his father. As we all know what happened next, CJ was drafted by the Houston Texans and had a historic rookie year. He currently looks poised to be the next great NFL quarterback and is surely on his way there. But none of this should come as a surprise. The foundation of CJ Stroud was set long ago, a foundation built on faith and forgiveness. This is why CJ Stroud will forever be great on the field, but an even better man off of it. This is All Hail Cullen, and if you enjoyed this story, do us a favor, hit like and subscribe to the page. We are posting stories like this here weekly, bringing you the never before told details and the behind the scene perspectives on all of your favorite players and NFL stories. So until next week, learn the lesson of perseverance and overcoming adversity from CJ Stroud, and I'm Cullen. Peace.